First of all, I had big plans for episode 150, totally scrapped by the death of Louie Anderson. Why? Dead comedians have been doing very well on this podcast. Like the ratings go up by a third when I put the picture and tell a story about somebody who died. And it's funny, as we get into me studying the numbers here on the podcast, for some reason, my solo shows rate better. I don't know if you guys send out little notes to each other and say Tom is not burdened by a guest. However, when I do have guests, new listeners come in and I don't know if they stick around. But it seems to be topics and the zeitgeist seem to do well on the podcast. And maybe I'll start getting into that. I don't know. It's been a year, man. It's been a year. Betty White. Now, Betty White, I have nothing to say about Betty White that you probably don't have. I have one great Cloris Leachman story that I would swap in and out as a Betty White story because I would confuse the two in the late 2000s until Cloris Leachman squarely died about 10 years before Betty White. But listen, I'm a comedian. I'm a successful comedian. I've been around famous people and I've been around people who have been around famous people. And my Louie Anderson story is a unique one. He, in the year from, let's say, 1999 until the show ended in 2002, May of 2002, I worked at the Rosie O'Donnell show. And my glamorous stories come from my years as a writer's assistant there. But before that, I was a producer's assistant. And I don't want to give any of the names away just in case I'm violating doctor-patient or producer-assistant confidentiality. But there was a really nice producer there who would let me answer that person's phone. Actually, I got paid to answer that person's phone. And maybe that's why I was not a great assistant, or why I was a great assistant, because I use phrases like, he let me answer it, like it wasn't part of my job. And, some of these producers, when you work with these celebrity producers, and it holds true today, they'll become friends with a famous person, and it probably behooves the famous person to be friends with producers at these talk shows. So that way, if there's a last minute cancellation, someone will go, oh, let's book Tom Kelly, or, oh my gosh. Tom Kelly would be great for this. Like I see a lot of people on daytime TV who, I'm going to be bitter for a second, who I don't understand why the hell they get booked on daytime TV all the time. And that's because they have friends that are producers. They're just friends. And that's what I need to do more of, is just learn to up climb a bit and just make friends who are in good spots. And I don't know if this is what Louie, I keep wanting to call Louie Anderson Louis CK. Is anybody else doing that this weekend? But yeah, Louie Anderson would call the producer in the middle of the day from time to time to say hi. I remember this happening a lot. I called one of my friends who was primarily responsible for answering this person's phone, and she says it did not happen as much as I remember. But I remember Louie Anderson would call and it'd be like, hey, it's Louie, and I also remember his voice being more gruff than it is in the YouTube clips I keep seeing. But the guy would call Louie, and I don't know, was he lonely? Was he trying to get booked on the show? But he called a lot. And he was nice to me on the phone. And part of me wonders, should I have talked to him longer on the phone? I feel like at the time that would have been weird. Tom, why isn't the paperwork done? I was talking to Louie Anderson, the star of The Family Feud and legendary stand-up comedian, while he was trying to call someone else. But what's funny is, again, I don't know if I was a great or an awful assistant, but my first year on that show, I would answer phones that for people who preferred to answer the phones themselves. But there were a couple of times where I would talk to one of my bosses, Maria's mom, at length, because Maria's mom was great and I had nothing to do that first year. But anyway, I'm rambling. I'm digressing. Years after working at Rosie, Louie would work with the comedy club owner of chain Bonkers with Margaret and Joe Sanfilippo, who were very good to me about giving me my very first road gigs. And there's part of me that wishes I could work for them more. Bonkers Comedy Club. It's Bonkers with a Z. I think those are people you can, it's funny. Marianne Stelmachek, you're always asking me who we can annoy. Let's start annoying the good people at Bonkers Comedy Club on Instagram. They book great shows all around the country. They were probably the king of pop-up shows long before pop-up shows were cool. And they have a couple of permanent installations around the country. And what was funny was Joe, when I was, probably at The View at this point, probably called me trying to get Louie on television and saying, hey, I could have you open for Louie. And, and there's always that moment of me saying, I can't get your friend on TV, but I'm still available for the gig. And then you wonder why the phone doesn't ring. And Louie was a man who took leaps, working backwards on his career. The man's won an Emmy for his role playing a woman on baskets, Zach Galifianakis's mom. He took a personal leap, putting himself out there for I think it was a diving reality show called Splash, and you think about him being heavy set and wearing a swimsuit and diving into a pool. Hard to believe that show didn't get picked up for a season 2. But I've been going into the Louie Anderson rabbit hole a lot this week, and actually quite a bit about a month or two ago. And I don't know why I went into the rabbit hole on Louie Anderson a month or two ago, but I did. But at the social media suggestion of a comedian named Joe List, I was watching Louie's first time on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. And Joe List points out not just how Louie killed, but that he looked so relaxed. I mean, and when you think about The Tonight Show being such a high pressure gig, you did The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. That's the magic moment. That's the magic moment I'm craving in my own career right now, is you did 6 minutes well on Carson in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. You were a star and your calendar was filled the next day. Me, I did my 8 minutes on The View, got a tape a comedian would murder for on that show. And I don't think I was booked the next weekend, and that's not a statement about The View, or I'm not trying to compare The View to Johnny Carson, but that's the statement on network comedy. It's just how different it is. But it's funny that confidence is something I think a lot of comedians would love, that polish he had. And again, while down the Louie Anderson rabbit hole, Louie Anderson said on the Bob Saget podcast, it's almost like I'm trying to depress myself this weekend. He said that by the time he got the Tonight Show, that he had 6 Tonight Show appearances ready and polished and in his pocket. And I don't know, that's definitely not something. I'm in a spot where I am very well exposed this week to, and, even to this day, after 20 years of show business, I don't know if I have the 5 minutes set ready. I have hours of material, but I don't think I have the set itself woven together. I don't think I have, Louie, the character, was very much presented in his first Tonight Show stand-up performance. Look at me, I'm fat. To just say that in a mean way. And he sort of, exposes the pain with mean jokes that he tells about himself. Very self-effacing. You know, another lesson to learn from Louie Anderson is, and again, this is from me looking at Louie Anderson clips so you don't have to. He told this story a few times about how he got cast on Coming to America. Now, if you just put in Coming to America, Louie Anderson, Eddie Murphy, there's a lot of stories about Eddie Murphy being told he needed a white guy in the movie. Well, I guess the real question is now, how does Louie Anderson get to be the white guy? And the story that Louie Anderson tells is Louie Anderson is at some sort of fancy restaurant, and Murphy goes in with his entourage, and he doesn't say hi because Eddie Murphy's busy, and on the way up, he's a big shot. He's done, you know, right before Coming to America, you know, he had Trading Places and, you know, all his Raw and all his big specials were right before that. You know, he was on the way up, man. I mean, there was nobody hotter than Eddie Murphy at this point, right before Coming to America. And Louie Anderson finished his meal and then left his credit card with the waiter and said very specifically, please do not tell Eddie Murphy until after I'm gone, but would you please pick up the tab for Mr. Murphy and his friends? And a day or two after that, Eddie Murphy gets a call. I'm sorry, Eddie Murphy's manager calls Louie Anderson and says, hey, would you like to be in this movie, Coming to America? And Louie at this point had no idea Coming to America was on the radar. He had not auditioned for it or anything like that. He just said, you know, Eddie Murphy's probably always buying people things. Why don't I buy something for Eddie Murphy? And I don't know what the exact lesson is there, but it's something to absorb. Instead of being the leech, he gave and then got a lot more back. You know, and I guess my final reflection on Louie Anderson is there was a kindness and loneliness to his performances. And I see that in myself and a lot of big name performers I've met over the years. People who've been up, a little bit down. They still got more in life than what I've wanted. But they, yeah, you know, that's the right way to say it. You know, Louie Anderson achieved way more than I have in my 20 years. And yet there was a sweetness and loneliness to watching him be interviewed and perform. And when you get into me and this podcast and looking at my own success, I've had more than one person say that I am too loved to be successful. That, I mean, and that, you know, look, I mean, I got parents and a brother who love me. You know, I have friends who love me. I have podcast listeners who love me. And the podcast listeners who love me, you know what? It's amazing how real this one-way form of communication is. But the notes you guys have sent me over the last couple of weeks mean something. So if you get time, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to the Louie Anderson First Time on the Tonight Show. And if you're feeling really crazy, you can listen to him on Bob Saget's podcast, which is still up. The interview is from May of 2021. And nothing more uplifting for your Monday afternoon than to listen to two dead people talk to each other. You know, people, you know, it's funny. There are days where I feel like 3 shows a week is too many. And then there are days where I feel like 3 20-minute shows a week is not enough. I'll tell you one happy story about me that I should have led with. You know what's cool about doing this 17 minutes into the show? Nobody. The nice thing is it won't make any headlines, but I've been subbing in at Colbert this week. If you're in New York City this week, I think it's easy to get tickets because it's a slow month and there's vaccine requirements and background checks. You could get tickets to The Late Show with Stephen Colbert at oneiota.com. And God willing, I will be the warm-up comedian this week. There you go. And if you want to go support me, if you are related to me, I don't want to see you. There you go. So don't surprise me if you know you're on the list of people I don't want to see. And why do I not want to see super close friends and relatives in a performance like that? Because it takes me from comedian Tom to your friend Tom. My friend Joey Cola used to tell me early in my career, Tom, you always perform like your mother is in the room. Well, the best way to make sure you don't perform like your mother is in the room is to not have your mother or anybody who knows your mother in the room. I mean, actually, a funny one about one of my uncles, my favorite uncle, actually. My favorite uncle is on Facebook. He might only check it every couple of months. I'm not exactly sure. But the problem with the Facebook algorithm is 8 to 12 weeks ago, I posted a Facebook status offering to sublet my apartment. For some reason, that just went up into my uncle's social media feed 3 months later. And then my father had breakfast with my uncle, and my uncle says, Tommy's looking to sublet the apartment. And my father, who might enjoy seeing me only 2 days a week now that the worst pandemic is over, or the worst of the pandemic is over. Now that we're down, you know, it's funny. I'm trying to speak more clearly on the podcast. And when I catch myself not using, conjunctions and verbs and prepositions, and then I correct myself, I then realize, fudge, what was I saying? But here's the funny is, my uncle now has said to my father, I think Tommy's thinking of moving home for a while. And my father says, are you trying to sublet your apartment? Why? You know, which is, I think my father likes to say, I'm always welcome, but it's nice to know I can go somewhere else when we all get sick of each other. But anyway, that's my whole point is you don't want, you don't want people running, you don't want, Tommy's making fun of your grandparents. Just don't want, I don't want the criticism. There's a certain point where I don't want the opinions I care the most about. Truth bomb for the end of the show. Write that one down as a note. Like, actually, do me a favor. If you got time between now and tomorrow's show, especially if you're listening early on Monday morning, send me a note about what you have learned from me, because I may do my 150th anniversary episode as 151. But what have you learned from listening to the Tom Kelly Show or the Tom Kelly conference call, as my friends Dan and Brian put it? What have you learned from this? I mean, even too, if you noticed at the top of the show, I've called this the home of self-improvement rather than self-help. I feel like self-improvement is less needy than self-help, but it has more syllables. So what have you learned from this, the home of self-improvement and fun, the Tom Kelly Show? Send me a note, TomKellyShow@me.com, or just write the comment on one of my Instagram pictures. I'll see it, people. It's not like I have a social media manager doing this stuff. And there you go. Oh, and the big ending to what I was saying is I've been isolating this week because I got to make sure I pass my COVID tests every day. I can't get COVID because there's a dollar value on this week. This is the week where I'm finally making money. I cannot get COVID between now and Friday. So I've been isolating, and I call that studying for my COVID test. God, You know what? Now I just feel like I spent too much time talking about Louie Anderson, but you're going to listen, people. You're going to listen. That's the big stuff, people. Let's do the magic mirror. Little magic mirror time. I want to thank Diane, our Sicilian aunt up there in Canada, Jack S., Jacob Lee Downey, Mark Epstein, Jamie and Susanna, Melzel, Laney, Dan S., Larry F., Chris Whipple, Brian Kist, Karen Ruiz, Carla O., Incog Fredo, Phil Gaduti, Christian Blatt of the Blattcast. Thank you all for listening and showing support. I've been following your notes over the last couple of days. And of course, Ryan Wally. And if I didn't say Marianne Stelmachek, well, you got it twice. If you're feeling crazy, something fun to do, go to Bonkers Comedy Club and just start commenting, hey, when am I going to see Tom Kelly at one of your shows? That's the easy ask. And obviously rate, subscribe, share, comment. I'm doing stuff on TikTok every day. Leave a comment if you like one of my TikToks or Instagrams. And most importantly, friends, thank you for sharing the journey with me. I enjoy doing this with you all. Until tomorrow, good night, New York.